What is going on, bottom line viewers? It's Mitch back here with another live reaction to the NFL offseason. Here, Joe Flacco has been traded to the Denver Broncos for a fourth-round pick in the 2019 NFL Draft. And it's interesting because Case Keenum is going to be on his way out. Joe Flacco is going to be the starting quarterback moving forward into this season for the Denver Broncos, presumably. We don't exactly know for sure if Joe Flacco is going to be, around for multiple seasons. But from what I have basically gathered is that Joe Flacco is going to be the quarterback for the Broncos this season and then potentially next season, depending on what happens with him in this season. If he performs, he's going to be the quarterback next season as well. If he doesn't perform, then they might get rid of him. So Joe Flacco traded for a fourth-round pick to the Denver Broncos. Joe Flacco, of course, former Super Bowl champion of the Baltimore Ravens. And he struggled over the last 4 years. Over the last 4 years, he hasn't even thrown for 7 yards per attempt. He's actually struggled to get above that. So he's been a quarterback that has been probably one of the bottom 5 to 10 starters in the NFL. To me, he still has the talent to be a starting quarterback in the NFL. I would still rank him in the top 32 in the NFL. So I think he deserves to have a starting job somewhere else because it's not going to be Baltimore anymore. And I think he does deserve to be a starting quarterback and does deserve to have his job somewhere else. I think it's time for him to have a change of scenery, time for him to be somewhere that is not named Baltimore and kind of showcase his talents. And he's going to have that opportunity in Denver. I think a lot of people are going to criticize this move because it's John Elway, and a lot of people like to criticize John Elway when it comes to drafting quarterbacks, signing quarterbacks, and being a GM in general. But for me, when I take a look at it, I'm saying, okay, Joe Flacco to me, sure, him and Case Keenum, probably similar level of quarterbacks. But Joe Flacco to me is a little bit more talented. I think you have a different skill set in Joe Flacco than you do in Case Keenum. I think he has a better deep ball. I think he has a better arm strength. He has better size. I think he has better predictability, and he kind of knows how to get it done in the playoffs. If Joe Flacco knows anything, he knows how to get it done in the playoffs. When it comes to Case Keenum, he's still sort of a wild card. Sometimes he'll show up and play well. Sometimes he won't. And to me, Case Keenum got his chance last season to perform. He didn't really perform to the way that the Broncos wanted him to, and that's why he's not going to be the quarterback of the Broncos. Now, we got to talk about a couple things. Not only are we talking about Joe Flacco and his potential with the Broncos, but we're also talking about the potential of Case Keenum and him being traded, because the Broncos have talked about Case Keenum is on the number. He has $7 million that he's going to make this year guaranteed. So they need to move him somewhere else to basically, I don't know if they want to move him. Like they said they want to move him. My question is, I guess they don't really want to pay him, but they still got to pay him that money because it's guaranteed money. So they still have to pay him that money, but they're going to have to move him because they want to, I guess. I don't know. But to me, I would have probably rather just have Case Keenum and Joe Flacco have a competition in training camp and see who wins and see who the better guy is. To me, that's probably the way to go. I guess that's not the way they want to go. And I guess they're going to go and trade Case Keenum. Now, one place that does make sense to me to trade Case Keenum is trade him to the New York Giants. Now, the New York Giants do have Eli Manning. They're committed to Eli Manning for the foreseeable future, but we don't know. Eli Manning doesn't have a backup. He could get injured. He is old. He is up there in age. And let's be honest, Eli Manning's not a very good quarterback. Pat Shurmur did work with Case Keenum in his most successful season in Minnesota. I think that makes a lot of sense. So to me, that would be the place that I would really look at and say, hey, that's where Case Keenum could be traded potentially. Joe Flacco, I think, like I said, I think he's a little bit of an upgrade over Case Keenum in some departments, and others maybe not so. He doesn't have great mobility. I think he doesn't have kind of that just aggressive style of play. But maybe the Broncos are looking with Vic Fangio at coach. They're looking to be a defense-first team. They're looking to win because of their defense. And obviously, Joe Flacco is a quarterback who knows how to win when his defense is the strength of the team. So Joe Flacco knows what it's like to be on a great Baltimore Ravens team who can run the football and who can play defense. Joe Flacco knows how to manage a game. He knows how to stay mistake-free, and I think that's what they're looking for at their quarterback position. Case Keenum, he's not that kind of guy. He's a little bit more reckless. He's a little bit more aggressive, and Joe Flacco maybe gives them an upgrade in that department. So I don't hate the move. Now, the worst part of the move is that Joe Flacco has to probably rework his deal. He's scheduled to make about $18.5 million this season, $20 million the following season. So that's why I said at the top of the video, this is basically a workout. This is a okay, make or break season, a prove it deal for Joe Flacco. If he plays well this year, the Broncos are going to give him a chance. Then they can continue and pay him that $20 million in the following season. And even so, they probably want to rework his deal if they can. You know, if the Broncos can rework his deal, it's probably more likely that he plays this season. And if he plays well, they rework his season, rework his average next year, his money next year. Or they could rework it now before the season's even started to add some extra pieces in free agency and not have to pay him $18 million, which he's probably not worth at this point in his career. So, yeah, it's basically an average quarterback over an average quarterback, and they're going to try and move the other average quarterback somewhere else. So Joe Flacco traded to the Denver Broncos. I think it's an interesting move. I think it's one that does help the team in the way they want to play. And I think it's one that also it's a little bit head scratching in the fact that John Elway just doesn't want to kind of trade up in the draft and pick a guy up in the draft that he feels is going to be the future of his franchise. He's really struggled with moving on from Peyton Manning. He struggled with finding that replacement for Peyton Manning, and he's continued to struggle. Now, my kind of analysis of that is that, okay, Joe Flacco, he's a guy that he's a guy that he could play one season. And because this draft this year doesn't have a lot of great quarterback talent, we can then evaluate the quarterbacks for next year. And if Joe Flacco isn't the guy this year, we'll take a guy next year and we'll move forward with that guy next year. So that's kind of my analysis on that people are criticizing John Elway for not going with the future. Well, if you take a look at this year's quarterback class, it's not one of the best. And there's a couple of good quarterback classes coming up. Joe Flacco is serviceable enough. If they can rework his contract, it would be a nice contract for them. If they can't, then it becomes a little bit of an issue. But I think you're on both sides of the fence where it could be a good move. It could be a bad move. I'm kind of in the middle. I'm kind of like the wait and see approach here, but it is a very interesting, compelling move moving forward for the Broncos. Let's get to the comments, and then I'm going to wrap it up pretty quickly here, guys. It is a blizzard outside. I just walked through a bunch of snow, so I had to kind of like rework, and now I got to go back into the blizzard to go back to class, so that's going to be a lot of fun. Mark says, hi, all. What's going on, Mark? Midwest Sports says, hi, what's going on, Midwest? Hot Take Hockey says, huge. Deshaun Drakeford says, hi, I was not surprised that he got traded. Not surprised that he got traded. Midwest Sports says, what about AB? I did make a video about Antonio Brown. If you guys haven't already checked it out, I posted it this morning. Go check it out. I put the 5 destinations where Antonio Brown could be heading. Go check that video out real quick. I think it's a good one. I don't know. Let me know. Go to the comments. Let me know if it's a good video or not. Bret Hart says, hey, Mitch, put me over. The best there is, the best there was, the best there ever will be. Bret Hart. Deshaun Drakeford says, heading to a competitive AFC West. Yeah, the Raiders are still kind of a bad team, but when you look at the Broncos as a team, they're pretty talented. I mean, their offense could use some work. I think they could add a receiver, maybe a tight end and an offensive lineman. But when you look at their offense, they have a running back, Phillip Lindsay, and they have a running game that's pretty solid, even with a lackluster offensive line last year. So I think they can get some things done with Vic Fangio coming in as their coach, who we know is a defensive mastermind. They have Von Miller. They have Bradley Chubb. They have a pretty decent secondary. I think they're a couple of pieces away from being a team that can compete for the playoffs. So I do understand the move, and I do think that Joe Flacco, again, is a better fit for this team than Case Keenum. He just costs more, which is not the best thing because he's not that great. Carlos says, it's a bad move for me on the Broncos' part. They had the number 10 in the draft and probably could have traded for Nick Foles or drafted somebody, but I think Flacco is one of their worst options. I don't know how much better Nick Foles would be than Flacco. He would also probably cost a lot more. So I wouldn't say that that's necessarily a better move in getting Nick Foles, because I don't know if he really fits what they want to do there in Denver. So I can't really say that he would be a better move. He is a better quarterback, don't get me wrong, but he might not fit what they want to do as well, and he's going to cost more. Duke says, as a fan of the Broncos, I'm considering this move as a Band-Aid. I would agree. It's a Band-Aid move, but it could be a Band-Aid move that does work out. Boss says, as a Broncos fan, I want to see this move as an opportunity for Elway to not draft a quarterback this year. That's true. Yeah, he's not going to draft the quarterback this year. That's exactly what I said. And I feel like he's looking to draft the quarterback in the next 2 years and not this year, because I don't think he feels like this class is very good. Duke says, as long as they address the offensive line, this may be a great move, but Flacco is not a mobile quarterback. Agreed. Jake says that explains why they didn't try to win the game with Flacco against San Diego. They knew where they're going to shit him. He wouldn't have won the game. I think Lamar Jackson was the guy to go with in that game. And if they would have let him pass a little bit earlier, I feel like we're talking about a different story, because once they did, he started scoring a lot of points and they almost ended up winning that game at the end. But that's a totally different thing. I don't think they would have won the game with Joe Flacco. And I don't think Joe Flacco played better last year than Lamar Jackson. The future with the Ravens is Lamar Jackson. They're going forward with Lamar Jackson as their starting quarterback, and they're going to work an offense around him. No more distractions with Joe Flacco. Carlos says this doesn't change the Broncos, or will stay in the this doesn't change the Broncos for where they'll stay in the AFC West. The Chiefs and the Chargers will be better. I agree, they'll be better, but I think the Broncos will be more competitive if they can add to their offensive line and add a receiver. I think they can be a pretty good team, like I said, because I think their defense will be improved, and I think that pass rush duo with Vic Fangio as the coach is going to be pretty nasty. Solid Marcos says, I believe the Broncos are gambling on this. Flacco's elite quarterback, but anything could happen. I think you think Flacco's an elite quarterback? I don't know about that. Bret Hart says, hey, Mitch, do you watch baseball? No, I don't. Sorry, Bret Hart. I kind of like watch the World Series and some of the big games, but other than that, not a huge baseball guy. Trevon says Flacco could be to the Broncos in 2019 what Brad Johnson was to the Bucs in 2002. It's a possibility. I wouldn't count on the Broncos defense being that good this year, but it should be at least a top 10 defense, I would think, maybe a top 5 defense. So that's where I'm going to wrap it up, guys. I hope you enjoyed this reaction. If you did, Gronk, spike that like button. Subscribe to the Bottom Line View for more if you haven't already, and check out all the other videos on the channel. Really appreciate the support going forward. More free agency draft videos coming, and reactions, of course. Thanks again. It's Mitch, and peace out.